Hey, welcome back to the stash.
Hey everyone, I just wanted to say that
I've made a severe and continuous lapse in my judgment, and I don't expect to be forgiven. I'm simply here to apologize.
So our story begins with a flashback, one where Peter has taken his Uncle Ben's army jacket. His attitude has gotten far worse, his behaviour is completely unacceptable, and so Aunt May is rightfully angered by it all. However, she becomes too aggressive, to the point of being abusive. But that's when the memory fades back into Peter's mind. The drugs are once again having a massive effect on his perception. The memory for the most part was real, but May would never have gotten physical. There's no time to really process that, however, for Spider-Man is currently locked in battle with Itsy Bitsy. The fight is brutal, and in all honesty, Spidey isn't doing too well. In fact, he doesn't even land a proper hit before Itsy Bitsy with a vicious blow knocks him out cold. Sometime later, Peter slowly awakens. He tries to gather his bearings, but his head is still a mess. However, he learns that Itsy Bitsy is working for someone who wants Spider-Man dead, as well as that the Rhino being intoxicated was a complete accident, but we'll get back to that later. Itsy Bitsy though feels conflicted. On one hand, she has deep feelings for Spider-Man, but on the other, she really likes her new job, and to keep said job would require her to put those feelings aside. But then, she kisses Spider-Man, only to shove him off the bridge and into the river below. Soon after, at May's apartment, a bruised and battered Peter Parker makes an appearance asking for a place to stay. But as Peter tries to get some rest, his mind does anything but grant him that wish. He returns to the flashback from before, but this time Ben is there. Peter's attitude somehow gets even worse. It's to the point where he's barely recognizable. And so Ben sternly tells him if he hates it here so much, he's free to leave, which results in Peter doing just that. The memory fades again as the hours go by. May eventually tries to check up on Peter, but when she opens the door, she finds that he's snuck out of the apartment. He's gone directly to Norman Osborn to get patched up, but while he's there, the two also do some more detective work where Peter finds an important lead. Before it was revealed that the Rhino was accidentally intoxicated, and it just so happens that Peter found heaps of used soda cans in the Rhino's apartment of a brand he's never heard of before. So with the pieces of the puzzle slowly coming together, Pete then heads off to ask for Brian's help. He gives him a sample of the soda for him to analyze, and as a way to make up for him sort of damaging Brian's reputation, he promises to quit his new job if nothing's wrong with the drink. But later that night, thanks to Norman Osborn, Spider-Man enters the sole facility producing the soda. He watches from high above, but that's when a mysterious voice speaks out. Peter turns around, his eyes widen, his heart begins to beat faster and faster, for he's now about to face off against the Hobgoblin. This issue to me just wasn't anywhere near the quality of the previous one, and that's a bit disappointing, especially coming off what felt like such a solid step in the right direction. It's clear now that Joe Kelly is starting to properly make his stamp on the book. His voice, his style, his pacing, it's all becoming more defined, but with that also comes a type of writing that honestly often leaves me just staring blankly at the page. And not because it's confusing, but rather because it almost completely falls flat. There are moments in this issue where I find myself just zoning out. The emotional hook has become a parody of itself, the dialogue genuinely irks me at times, and certain character choices are borderline baffling. And it's frustrating because you can tell that for a modern day ASM comic, there's potential here. Some of the ideas and concepts in its initial form aren't bad on paper, but the execution feels like it's severely slipping again. Now, look, I actually like the way the flashbacks were handled in the last issue. It was nice to see Peter finally showing a bit more of an edge, or even if it was just his younger years, and gave him a bit more dimension to his character. A glimpse into the kind of emotional mess he might have been through his years. Now, did my liking of it stem from the fact that for almost 2 decades, Peter Parker and literally everything has been portrayed as this soft, innocent loser? Yeah, probably. And sure, it wasn't groundbreaking or even a return to pre-One More Day Spidey, but I believed in issue 2, it still worked. But in this issue, my god. Callie ran that idea straight into the ground. The flashbacks here read like a bad parody of themselves, like somehow that entire concept of the story became a massive negative for me. Peter's behavior is so over the top that it stops feeling like a troubled kid lashing out and starts feeling more like a completely different character. And chances are, if Uncle Ben is so pissed off at Peter that he tells him to basically get out of the house, then you know your writing is f***ed. I don't remember Peter ever being this much of a brat towards Aunt May and Uncle Ben, and frankly, I don't think he would act like this to them at all. In the last issue, there was just enough attitude to make it believable. It was the stuff we've seen in the movies, and it's even been explored in the comics a couple times, and to show that maybe he was going through something. But when you pair that with what's shown here, it suddenly feels like they're trying to rewrite his entire personality as a kid. And it really dragged the issue down for me. It's not just a misstep either, it's completely out of character. And when you mess up something that foundational, it's hard to stay invested in the story around it. Now we might as well get into what everyone's been talking about online, Itsy Bitsy. Now listen, I get what they're trying to go for here with her. Like how her whole personality is meant to be chaotic, unhinged, unpredictable, that sort of wild energy that can either really work or completely miss the mark. But for me, I just really don't like her character. And I was looking forward to see how Callie was going to handle her return from that one comic no one cares about, but after reading this issue, she just doesn't feel like a Spider-Man villain. If anything, to me she feels more like a leftover X-Men antagonist, which sort of makes sense with the whole she's got 50% of Spider-Man and 50% of Deadpool's DNA, but anyway, her personality just clashes a lot against Peter's world. Her design and overall fighting presence may be a pretty fun aspect and dynamic of the comic, but even with that, I find that it's just still a mismatch, and that might be intentional, yet it doesn't make it good. Then there's the whole her having some of Peter's DNA, her referring to Peter as her dad, and her eventually kissing him without consent while he's drugged out of his mind. You know, Joe Kelly, you've got some odd f***ing themes in your writing.
I don't know. I think that's a bit dodgy, mate.
Itsy Bitsy here is such a mixed bag. I didn't like the bridge scene at all, and the tone was all over the place, but weirdly enough, I didn't mind the action itself. The sequence and the actual fighting was fine, but her as a character was just way too over the top for me. Her dialogue especially had me cringing multiple times. She talks in this super modern way, like stereotypically Gen Z level modern, and it just never lands in my opinion. It doesn't feel natural. Instead, it feels like a 50-year-old man trying to write how he thinks young people talk. Oh wait, yeah. It feels like that because it is. And unfortunately, this isn't just a trait purely for Itsy Bitsy, it's a recurring theme with Joe Kelly's writing. There's this constant attempt to prove he's hip with how people talk now, and instead of making the characters feel fresh, it just makes the dialogue feel forced and awkward. Like he's trying way too hard to connect with the audience, and if anything, it just pulls me out of the story every time I see that sort of dialogue. Now, if Itsy Bitsy were the only one talking like that, then maybe I could look past it. It'd still be annoying, but at least it would feel more like a character choice. But when everyone starts sounding the same and when that tone spreads to almost the entire cast, it loses all sense of uniqueness. Everyone ends up feeling like they're written by someone trying to sound young, instead of just writing them like real people. God, this must have been how kids in the 60s felt when Stan Lee tried to make his characters sound modern for the time. I'm happy that Hobgoblin is finally getting in the mix now though. I love this character, and the 80s for me is Spider-Man at his very best, and so from that, Hobby has always had a bit of a soft spot in my Spidey heart. His design here looks really cool. I do miss the glider though, but what can I say, I like the classics. Anyway, I just hope that this book can, at the very least, serve as a mini redemption arc for the character. He's been through a lot of average to downright bad stories since forever now, so if this comic can bring back some of the weight to the name of the Hobgoblin, then I'd be pretty happy. But I cannot end this video without giving proper credit where it's due, and that is to Pepe Larraz, who is easily carrying this entire comic on his back. No matter how uneven the writing might seem, his artwork continues to be an absolute showstopper. Larraz brings an energy to this book that completely transforms the experience. His action scenes are so fluid and dynamic, they almost feel animated. Every punch, every leap, every swing, every battle is full of movement and power. It's alive in a way that most superhero comics only wish they could be. And it's not just the big stuff either, because the quieter moments, these slower emotional scenes, they're just as impressive. The way he frames expressions, body language, even the smallest shifts in posture, it all brings so much depth to each panel. You can feel the emotion in the art without needing the dialogue to tell you. His work doesn't just complement the script, it honestly elevates it. In fact, it's safe to say that without his artwork, this run would feel way flatter than it currently does. His consistency, attention to detail, and sheer talent are what's keeping this book visually engaging issue after issue. His artwork is just amazing and one of the very few strong positives for this entire comic. Overall, by the end of the issue, I'm left with familiar feelings. Two in particular I've had far too often with Amazing Spider-Man over the past few years. Conflicted and let down. There are elements here that show real promise, and for a brief moment it felt like we might be finally steering this series in a direction that values character, momentum, and tone. But then the story, thanks to this issue, just stumbles so hard. It doubles down on forced character moments, leans into awkward dialogue choices, and undercuts the emotional weight it could have had with writing that feels more concerned with being annoying than being meaningful. And Itsy Bitsy as a villain is a perfect representation of this run's problems. A concept that might sound interesting on paper, but in execution feels jarring, out of place, and tonally off. And that's not even getting into the bizarre choices with Peter's characterization in the flashbacks, which completely derail the more grounded, believable version we were just starting to see in the previous issue. Not to mention how in this release, those flashbacks almost completely ruin the character of Peter, especially when he's growing up with Aunt May and Uncle Ben. I honestly really don't like the scenes in this issue. I thought it was horrible and completely out of character from all sides. This run owes a lot to Pepe Larraz, whose artwork is quite literally doing all the heavy lifting for the entire series. Without his pages, without the emotion and energy he brings to every panel, I generally don't think I'd be as engaged as I am now, which isn't even that much in the first place. He gives this run a visual identity, something that the writing still struggles to find. But you might be wondering, where does this leave us? Well, it leaves us in a frustratingly familiar place, waiting once again for this book to commit to something better. And it sucks because Spider-Man deserves to have a good ASM series. He deserves to be restored at his rightful place at the top, but it seems that we're still going to have to wait even longer for that to happen. I'm just gonna go read Ultimate Spider-Man.